Welcome to the Wireless LAN News Desk for February the 8th, 2019. My name is Tom Carpenter, the CTO at CWNP, and this week for the News Desk, we have a special interview with Jason Hintersteiner, who participated in the CWIP JTA. Hey, it's Tom Carpenter here, CTO at CWNP, and we are talking with Jason Hintersteiner, who is here for the CWIP JTA in Las Vegas. And we're just going to have a little conversation about how it's going so far. We're a little over halfway through the JTA at this point in time. We're close to halfway through, and still a lot of work left to do. But we've learned some things already. So, Jason, welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you.
So this is your first JTA with us?
Yes, it is.
And totally stoked to have you here. I know that you bring a lot of different perspectives than a lot of the people do to this, from your past experience working in multivariate environments all over the place, and now also working in kind of a bridging world and things like that. You get to dive into some areas that not everybody does. With this particular JTA, for the Certified Wireless Integration Professional, what are you feeling so far about what the certification seems to be turning into?
So I think that certification is actually very, very important for our industry. That I think people get a tunnel vision in terms of focusing solely on Wi-Fi and solely on their little piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
And we all know that, Wi-Fi isn't the be-all, end-all of everything that's out there, and there's all sorts of stuff I know. I said that. I've been approaching, I come from a systems engineering background. I also come from a WISP background, so I had to do a lot of integration work just to get networks up and running.
Yeah.
Which, surprisingly, there's stuff that you can get all the way to a CWNE and not know anything about switches or VLANs or PoE. And, aside from, I've heard the terms, but I don't really actually need to know how to implement them in order to actually make a system work. And you can get all the way to CWNE without actually having to have that knowledge.
Yeah.
So, it's nice to kind of go back and kind of take a look at this from an integration and systems perspective, which is, okay, I have Wi-Fi. I've got these other things that I may want to tie into. BLE sensors, location tracking, licensed wireless links, whatever it is. I have to be able to kind of get all of these things to play nicely together. I think one of the dangers that it's not necessarily danger. One of the things we've been wrestling with is this going to be an overall breadth certification, or is it going to be a depth certification?
Yeah. Because
there's so many things that are out there in terms of analytics and telemetry and location-based services and so forth, that there's almost too many technologies and too many variants for any one person to fully know and understand and appreciate. Plus, even if you did, right, 6 months from now, there's going to be something new that nobody's even heard of. So, to me, the job of an integration professional is to understand that these things are out there as general categories, and to have at least a high-level breadth understanding of there are things like analytics out there. There are things like location beaconing out there. There are things like telemetry solutions out there. Understand what applications where you might want to use those, and so that you have them as tools in the toolbox. So, and understand essentially kind of who are the key players in those spaces. So that kind of covers the breadth portion. But then after that, we need to kind of get into the depth, which is, okay, if I'm not expecting a CWIP to be an expert in everything, then a CWIP should at least be able to build up expertise in one or more of those areas.
Yeah.
By researching it, gathering information, talking to appropriate vendors, and building expertise in at least certain specialties within that. That's applicable to whatever industry they're in or whatever projects they're working on, and so forth. And then once they're on kind of that project level, right, they should be able to evaluate what their requirements are, evaluate what their constraints are, evaluate what their existing network looks like, and whether or not, the existing network is going to handle those new requirements and constraints, right? Is it a simple model of, okay, I just have to plug in these BLE sensors and I'm done, or no, I got to rip all my APs and start over?
Yeah.
Or something in between. So that, to me, is the job of a CWIP in the proper sense, is to be able to understand what's out there, be able to deep dive into those specific areas where they need to deep dive, and then be able to go onto a project or an application or into an environment and say, okay, this is where I am. This is where I need to go. These are the technologies that are available to me. This is how I get there. And then to now go and design and implement and execute on that.
Excellent. Well, you're here with 7 others. This is actually the largest JTA group we've had. We usually have 6 or 7 that end up being in the room. We've got 8, so you're there with 7 others. Has anything come up in the process so far that when someone brought it up, you thought, maybe that is interesting, or maybe you brought something up and others were kind of surprised by it? Anything so far that's surprised you might say, that you actually did decide in the end, yeah, this needs to be in there?
So, I'm not as much into analytics as some of the other people who are in attendance. Most of my background has been on SMB, Wi-Fi, and point-to-point and point-to-multipoint applications. So I don't tend to live in the, hospital world or large enterprise environment. I mean, I obviously understand it, but it doesn't mean that I live it day to day.
Sure.
And so a lot of the tools that are of big concern in the enterprise are things that haven't trickled down yet into that SMB world. That said, as always with these technologies, they're coming. If they're not already here, they're coming. So, and you do see some SMB vendors even starting to offer some tools in these types of arenas now. So even in the SMB world, maybe it's not happening quite as fast as it's happening in the enterprise world, right? These things are still coming, and it's still important to kind of know and understand that. To me, that was kind of one of the more eye-opening kind of revelations. What's also interesting is the fact that knowing how to program and knowing how to use APIs and be able to do scripting and so forth, and I've done some of that in my own work, but how important that's really becoming, and that's an important tool in the toolbox that I haven't really appreciated up until now, until this discussion, where you really need to at least understand the basics of how to do this. That said, I think by and large the process is going pretty smoothly.
Okay.
It's not as, dragged down, everybody kind of fighting, banging the table, right?
But it's not over yet.
No, it's not over yet. But I think, it's a very good group of people. I think this is probably, this is definitely very hard in the sense of we don't have anything to refer back to, right? With the other JTAs, right? All right, well, we know what the certification had before, maybe some of it was good, maybe some of it wasn't, right? Now we have a chance to fix that. Now we can look at it more from a systemic perspective in terms of, okay, what does a person who has this certification do? So, with some of the other existing certifications, you at least have that as a reference.
Yeah.
And then you can go, okay, we like this, we don't like that, this needs to change, this needs to get added, this needs to get pulled out. With the CWIP, it's all new, and we've had debates over, hey, is this really an SP? Is this really a DP kind of requirement, or is this really an integration requirement? And those debates were not over yet. I could tell already that those debates are probably going to continue to happen throughout the rest of the JTA process. But there's definitely a need, I think we all feel that there's something missing from, the current professional path. Where there are gaps in the knowledge, and there's only so much you can stuff into one exam. And into one certification and should. And the danger, though, is that this becomes the catch-all for everything else. And, that's not necessarily maybe some of the stuff actually needs to be broken out. There was talk about like having a frequency professional kind of level where you're focused on, the differences between 900 megahertz, 2.4, 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, licensed frequencies like CBRS, 11 gigahertz, and so forth. What are the differences? Why would I want to choose one versus another, or another frequency in a particular application, and not just because of interference? That's definitely a subspecialty.
And maybe there's something in the future there. We'll see.
So, that's, but quite honestly, like even the programming, like what we talked about, like the analytics piece, I could see obviously you'd have to pick a different name for it, but I could see a certified wireless analytics professional. Where the focus is on, telemetry and analytics and taking those measurements and figuring out how to sort. Telemetry is gathering all the data. Analytics is what do I do with all the data once I have it?
Yeah.
And that is a science in its own right. So, and, there's a whole profession, big data, of people that are in the business of trying to sort through that kind of,
Oh, yeah.
those types of data sets, right? Maybe we need something like that for Wi-Fi. And maybe that's a subspecialty within Wi-Fi where you have people that are specialized as wireless big data experts. So
it seems to be coming, doesn't it? All of it.
Well, it's not a new question. When I started off in this industry over a decade ago, I was working for WISP, and I was doing scripting even back then, bash scripting, and simple stuff like that. And it was, and we implemented Nagios. We were gathering all this SNMP data from our modems and our routers and so forth. And I remember my boss coming up to me at one point and going, well, that's great, but what do I do with all of this stuff? Right? You're gathering all this data, which is fine. And I'm throwing it all into a big fat database, which is fine. But what do I do with it? That was a conversation I had 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the problem's only gotten worse because now there's more ways to collect data and there's more data that's made available to you from everything all the way down to the AP level to your switches and, your systems. Plus, if you have sensors and other IoT devices and stuff in the environment, you have all of these things that are generating data.
Yeah.
What the hell do I go do with this stuff?
Exactly.
Right. We're really only scratching the surface of that. And that's, I could see people who would be experts in just doing that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's some really great information. And I know everybody's going to love to hear from you on the Wireless LAN News Desk when we air this. But there's a whole lot of work left to do in the JTA, so I'm going to have to let you go.
Yeah, so Tom, thank you very much.
Appreciate you for talking to me.
Thank you.